This is The Red Lens.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you this evening? This is Cris von Erik, and this is The Red Lens. Tonight, we have actually, it's actually the first time we're actually having a recurring guest here. I want to welcome in Dr. Shawn T. Smith. How are you this evening?
Good. It's good to be here.
Oh, that's great. And again, I have to say that this is really like a watershed. You are the first person to actually come on twice with us, so I feel...
I must not have screwed the pooch too bad last time.
I know.
We had some sound issues, but hopefully otherwise it was okay.
That's true, and I think we got those all worked out, and maybe you're not so smart to stay away from us. So, but I also want to say that Dr. Smith has a book out, or has had a book out for a long time. It's the Tactical Guide to Women. The link I'm going to be putting up here during our discussion here. You can go directly to that link via Amazon and get yourself a copy of that. Is that also in like on Audible as well?
Yep, it's on Audible, and you can get a hard copy as well.
Oh, great. Wonderful. And you can also try to actually contact the doctor through Twitter right here, twitter.com/Iron Shrink.
You and I were talking wrestling a little bit before we came on, and do you remember the Iron Sheik?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so I sort of stole his handle.
Can you give us just a little backstory about your career, your schooling? How long have you been in the practice?
I've been in private practice for about 16 years, 15 years, something like that. And I went to the University of Denver. It's a clinical program, kind of a stringent clinical program here in Denver. I was lucky enough to get into that and got some good training there. And working backwards through time, jumping back to when I was a kid, I grew up in my dad's bar. He bought a truck stop in Commerce City, Colorado when I was 9 years old. And that's where I spent my nights and weekends. And that's really what got me interested in psychology and how adult humans get along and don't get along.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about like a living petri dish of people.
Yeah.
I mean that's got to be like the most eclectic group of people, men and women that you could possibly put together in one area.
Yeah.
It was a local bar.
Great. And if you ever have the chance to grow up as a little kid in a bar, it is the absolute best childhood in the world, to spend your Fridays and Saturday nights in that kind of environment.
I bet. I mean, well, there's probably people watching this that are like, "What are you, crazy?" You know. How long did your dad own that?
He had it for about 7 years.
I guess a lot of people that are going to be watching want to know, why do you hate Rollo Tomasi so much?
That's a dirty, rotten lie. I'm actually very fond of Rollo. And you're probably asking because we had this discussion about hypergamy, and it was my buddy Rich, he billed it as a big debate, and it was more of a friendly discussion. You know, I think I have more in common with Rollo on the topic of hypergamy probably than not, but I'm billed as the guy who thinks that hypergamy is a myth, and I don't think it's a myth. I just Rollo and I differ a little bit in how far you can take it, I think. But as far as debating Rollo, Rollo does a tremendous amount of good in the world, and I would even if I was in a position to go after him, which I'm not, I never would, because I respect what he does and I think he's a good guy.
No, I agree, and I think what maybe some people didn't kind of understand, because you have the program with Richard Cooper before the train wreck, where you take calls and you try to help guys out in relationships in terms of hopefully not making a mistake and knowing what they're getting into, etc. So I think a lot of people feel that, the doctor is he's just like us, and he has to operate, and he thinks on the same principles that everybody that follows this material does. And I think what they don't understand is that you have a professional practice, and you come at it from a different angle, and you have to.
Yeah, I do come at things from a different angle, and that's a good way to put it. You're just when you go through a training program like I went through, you're just trained to think a little bit differently, and hopefully in a productive manner.
And I think Franklin, are you there with us, or?
Good evening,
just watching.
gentlemen.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
I am here. For some reason, my camera isn't working, but I am here in spirit, and do carry on. Sorry to interrupt, and do carry on, Doctor.
It's good to see you, Franklin. Your avatar there looks like the emblem on a World War II British fighter.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Yeah, it's my old mod symbol. I wish I was a mod, but I'm not.
Okay.
Do carry on, John. I didn't mean to disrupt the flow.
Well, Franklin, if you want to chime in with a question, feel free. You can do that, please.
I'm not smart enough not to. So
that's good.
But I will always chime in with this something I will not that I do not understand. But do carry on, gentlemen.
All right. Well, getting back onto that little debate that you had with Rollo, and I'm not asking you to rehash everything that went on in that little conversation and dissertation, but what is hypergamy to you in terms of your practice and how you see it maybe on a daily basis?
In terms of my practice, it's not a huge consideration. Hypergamy is a female mating strategy. Women prefer to date across and up. They prefer men who are of higher social status in themselves. And this is not a Western invention. This is something that just appears to be cross-cultural. To my way of thinking, it has a lot to do with the way women choose relationships. Where I part ways with some guys in the red pill is that there's a lot of thinking in the red pill about how hypergamy causes women to end relationships. And that is certainly true sometimes, but from my clinical perspective, there are much bigger things that men should be worrying about if they're worried about maintaining their relationships than hypergamy.
Yeah. And I do have to agree with you on that. I think sometimes when a lot of guys operate in this realm, we can get bogged down to, I guess maybe you would think about, call it tunnel vision. Mm-hmm. You kind of say, okay, well, he or she is doing this because of this, and it's got to be this way. And I think actually that kind of thinking may actually lead the couples and the individuals actually to your door, because they're not seeing the whole picture, and they're not seeing those things that may aid to the reason why they're having those issues in life.
Well, and anxiety is a really funny thing. I used to work a lot with anxiety, and I still do to some extent, but it was really how I started my professional career. I liked working with anxiety because it's a relatively easy problem to solve. You can have a lot of success with treating anxiety, and I enjoyed that. And one of the really odd things about it is that the more you're worried about a particular thing, the likelier it is that you're going to manifest that thing in your life. And so if you're focused on, pick anything, hypergamy or getting in a car accident or whatever it is that your mind wants to lock into, you can really follow your mind down the path of creating that if you're not careful.
Yeah, I agree. Do you feel the same way, Franklin, on that?
Actually, I was just tuning into that. It does make a lot of sense. However, I did have a question to ask about why is it, I'm going to assume this is a basic question and answer type of a thing. I don't mean to take up too much time, but I do have a question now. You said earlier that women, they will date equal to themselves or higher. Are there any exceptions to that?
Oh yeah, there's exceptions to everything. If people are capable of doing something, somebody somewhere is doing it. Yeah, and there was an interesting study that came out of Sweden. You guys probably heard about it. It came out of Sweden a couple of weeks ago. And what the study was looking at women who are promoted to high office or CEO positions, high political office or CEO positions. And they took that piece of data and then they compared it to the family situation for those particular women. So was it a traditional family where the man made more than 60% of the income, or a non-traditional where the woman made more than 60% of the income? And in the traditional families, if the woman was promoted, her chances of divorce went from something like 7% to 13%. So it essentially doubled, which is not a huge percentage. If you look at the baseline, it's not a huge increase. But there's an example of hypergamy probably playing out where you have a situation where she started out where he was in had the higher social position, I guess you could say, if we're using money as a guideline, and she then surpassed him. And it's hard not to think that hypergamy doesn't contribute to those divorce situations. And so, getting back to your question, yeah, there are lots of women and men who enter arrangements where she has the higher social position, the higher income, and so forth. And it appears that if both parties are on board with that and they're okay with that from the beginning and they're very intentional about it, that it seems to work out. But if they're not intentional about it, or if things switch like it did in this Swedish study, it appears that it doesn't work out so well all the time.
And that can change the dynamic of the whole relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, thanks. I appreciate that. And actually, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, anything that changes the whole foundation of the relationship can get really troubling, whether it's somebody putting on a ton of weight and the other one doesn't, or somebody becoming an alcoholic and the other one doesn't. Anytime you have some kind of fundamental shift, it tends to get pretty rocky.
Yeah, actually, I know both situations actually. That are not close to me, but I know of two people that are in the same situation. You're not the same when I married you, et cetera, and you're not the same either. You grew hair in places you didn't, et cetera. But that's actually common. Okay, I was curious about that. Thank you for answering my question.
Well, Franklin, I'm not an alcoholic. I only had 2 or 3 before I came on.
He could quit anytime he wants.
That's right.
I do it every day, right?
That's right. I quit. Yeah, I quit every day at around midnight.
I can quit anytime I want.
So you already really kind of answered the next question I had in terms of, the feeling of hypergamy within relationships being the end all be all reason of them failing. And we already kind of covered that we know there's a lot of other extenuating circumstances. So that, again, I think, just like you said, while it can be a factor, I think it maybe sometimes gets the total blame all the time.
Yeah. And the whole thing that started this was I put together a 42-minute video on hypergamy, because I get the question a lot from guys who've crossed paths with the red pill community: is hypergamy real, and how worried do I need to be? So I put together this very long, detailed video about hypergamy. And it's interesting watching the comments. There's a handful of guys that are acting like I took a shit in their church. Sorry, I shouldn't be cursing here, but it's like I'll be more professional. I desecrated their religion by even pointing out that there's another side to this, but mostly not. Mostly it's guys saying, that's kind of an interesting point, and hadn't really thought about that.
No, I agree, and I will tell Mike here that yes, the doctor is quite smart. And thank you for noticing.
Well, that's very kind. I'll do what I can.
Now, speaking you brought up actually, I wanted to bring this up. In terms of being branded or labeled, do you think men and women, both, does that happen way too much in terms of even, the clinical field? Are you quick to do that?
My field is very quick to label boys, and this is a very well-known problem, very quick to label boys as being hyperactive and so forth, and needing to be medicated, and being defective girls, essentially. Not so quick to label girls, I don't think, but even with girls, yeah, there's a little bit of overdiagnosis probably going on. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about, is overdiagnosis?
Yeah, I've read that a lot, and I think you're 100% right. I think the knee-jerk reaction to now, I think it's like post 2000, I've seen it more, to say, oh, this kid's hyper. Mm-hmm. He's got ADD or ADHD, whatever you want to say. Let's put him on this. Let's do that. And I don't know if that's like necessarily the best course of action right away.
It's a horrible thing to do, to tinker with a kid's neurochemistry, their developing brain, unless you have a very good reason for doing so. And most, every psychologist I know will tell you the same thing. I tend to hang out with good psychologists, and they'll tell you the same thing. You say, if you have a kid that's displaying some trouble, you start with the environment. You don't start with the kid. You start with the parents and who's around them, and the teachers and the friends, and the whole surroundings of that child. But there are you can understand in situations where people are overburdened and, teachers who are overworked and so forth, there's a real temptation, I think, to go to medication first because it's a big hammer for a small problem and it takes care of things.
Yeah. And I think you're right with, let's focus on what is the support staff or lack thereof in that particular person's life, and start with that and then work your way in to that individual. So
I got a gripe about something here that's loosely related. My daughter's 13 years old and she's getting into middle school, obviously. And she has a lot of little friends that are drinking caffeine at 13. And this is a rotten thing to do to your kid. Their brains are developing, and caffeine it mimics a neurochemical, and it's not something that you want to be doing to a developing brain. And it just bugs me to see that out there.
Beats Ritalin.
Yeah, it does beat Ritalin.
It's less, it's less half-life, right?
What's the stuff that they used to put in batteries, or are they still using batteries? Lithium. That's another one. That's the lithium, I think. That's a popular one.
That's heavy-duty stuff.
Kids I had a friend of mine that was on that.
It's dangerous stuff, too.
Well, it was, actually. He went after my boss with a knife. We fired him. Haven't seen him since.
Wow.
Is that true?
That's a true story. Yes. As a matter of fact, I met him. We were both volunteering on the ambulance at the same time, and believe it or not, this person was actually a very good medic. But something happened in his life. It snapped, whatever it was, and his doctor threw him on lithium. And one day, I go to work and find out that he actually attacked my boss with a knife. And he got locked up. He was released, and I haven't seen him since. That was about 28 years ago. Yeah,
I hope you were nice to him at least.
Oh, as a matter of fact, him and I were good friends. That's what bothered me afterwards.
So if he's still walking around out there, at least.
Well, he's down south.
Good thoughts about you.
Yeah. He's Tennessee, last I heard.
Do you find, Doctor, that it is easy for you to pick out if people are being untruthful or lying to you?
No, psychologists are no better, and call me Shawn, by the way, but psychologists are not much better at detecting lies than anybody else. We're really good at it if we can give you a test, because we've developed some outstanding tests that can really detect some fine levels of lying. But just face to face, no, I'm no better than anybody else.
That's good. Big liars here on this program now.
It's not good for me.
Now, do you feel that men and women are looked at or treated differently in studies within your community?
You want me to talk about the APA for the next 3 or 4 hours?
Maybe for five or so minutes.
Yeah, the American Psychological Association, they have taken up arms against men, really. They've been infected by a really angry, hateful, embittered ideology. It's just a virulent form of feminism. And they have decided that they got no use for men anymore. And they would deny that, of course. They see things differently. I think they probably would tell you that they're helping men, but they're actually harming men and harming women and harming boys and harming girls in the process of this. And I've gone for hours about this, so I'll just give you the cliff notes there.
Yeah, no, well, you actually have gone on record in terms of having a whole video dissertation on it.
I've gone after them pretty hard. I've invited them to debate me, but those cowards won't do it.
Well, I think you've successfully stopped your invitation to the big dinner.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah, you're not going to get one of those again.
No.
Now, Franklin, did you have another question for Shawn?
No, I'm good, actually.
You're good for right now?
Yeah, I'm good for right now, but I will think of something.
I like to put Franklin on the spot a little bit.
That's okay. I don't mind that. Franklin's on the spot. Franklin's always on the job anyhow.
Franklin's avatar is a spot, literally.
I know.
Yeah. There you go.
See, you guys are talking about like it being like a World War II emblem or something. I just look at it as like this big eye that's like watching us.
Yeah, it's.
Want to talk about it like personality defects? This is something that I have.
It is sort of like the Monsters Inc. logo a little bit.
It is.
It was a mod symbol in the 60s. for in the '60s London, England versus the Mods and the Rockers type of thing, and that was their symbol, so to speak.
Okay.
If you've ever seen the Who in concert, sometimes you see Roger Daltrey with the eye patch. When he was going through that whole eye patch phase, he had an eye patch with the Mod symbol on it because he was a Mod.
Did it come out of World War II?
You know what? I believe it did. Yeah, it was on the back of the P-40 Warhawk or the here we go. The P-40 Warhawk or the Spitfire. I'm sorry, the Spitfire.
Okay.
You said that the why is one of the biggest, most difficult things to ascertain when you are counseling. I guess the why of somebody in terms of what they're doing, to actually get to the root of the issue with the person. Now, can you elaborate on that and why is that so difficult?
Help me out a little bit. It's possible I was a little drunk last time we talked. No, I was not, but I don't recall the.
No, well, this is actually again. I always watch people when they're doing other things, but in your back and forth with Rollo there, you mentioned that the why, like why somebody is doing something. I guess it was wrapped into the whole hypergamy thing, where Rollo was on the side of, it is. You can always point to that aspect of things, and then you came out and said, well, I have a little trouble with dealing with the or coming to the crux of the why in people. So I think you were saying that there's a lot more to things, that you have to look at things in a wider scope. So it's a little bit more for you to get to the crux of the matter.
Yeah. I might have been talking about working with couples, because I do work with couples quite a bit. And if you would have asked me when I was in my teens or 20s that I would end up being a psychologist who ends up working with couples, I would have laughed in your face, because it sounds like such a feminine thing to do. But it's actually really challenging, and it's a great puzzle, and it's very gratifying to help people get to a solution. And so when I'm working with a couple and they don't, they're in a pattern that has taken control of their relationship, some sort of communication pattern that just has gotten repetitive, and they're, at each other's throats, and they don't really understand why and what's going on. Part of my job is to do that functional analysis and find out what each of them is trying to accomplish in that moment. And so when you're looking at a group of people, like you're looking at women, or you're looking at, I don't know, Europeans or Americans or whatever, it's very easy to come up with your why as to why a group of people is doing something. And maybe it fits the individual, maybe it doesn't. And there's some merits to thinking about groups in a group way. But when you're working down at an individual level and you really want to understand a problem and what's contributing to a cycle, you really have to dismantle things from both points of view. And it's a fun challenge, but it is definitely a challenge. So, getting to the why there, I guess, that is the challenge.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for taking such good notes. I didn't mean to keep
no
off guard.
No, you can catch me off guard. I mean, if you did, that's my problem, not yours.
So now you also spoke a little bit about the challenge of setting aside theory in terms of mindset in some of the cases that are presented to you. Is that an individual thing, or is that something across the board that people in your profession?
It's something you have to do if you want to be a good clinician. You have to set aside your theoretical framework, at least for some period of time. And the reason you have to do that is because your theory, whatever it is, will blind you. And there's this concept called theory ladenness. It's about 100 years old, this idea. And it's the idea, it's from philosophy of science. It's the idea that when you look at the world through a framework, it changes the way you see the world. So here's an example of that. You want a quick little history of an experiment. There was a researcher, I can't remember his name, but he set up this experiment where he was showing images of playing cards to people. So he would show an 8 of diamonds and a 7 of hearts and a 6 of clubs or whatever. And he would flash these up on a screen for just a very brief period of time. We're talking milliseconds. And people would record what they saw. So he'd flash up a 6 of clubs. They'd write down 6 of clubs, or they'd report 6 of clubs. What he did, though, to make it interesting, was he threw in some fake cards. So he would throw in a black 3 of hearts, right? And 3 of hearts is red. So he would throw things in that were a little off like that. And what people would do when they saw this image for a millisecond or a few milliseconds was they would instantly and unknown to themselves correct it. So he would show them a black 3 of hearts. They would correct it in their brain and report that they saw a red 3 of hearts. And so that's an example of theory ladeness. People are trained that there are 4 suits, the 2 black ones and 2 red ones. And if something doesn't fit into that framework that is supposed to fit in that framework, we just unconsciously fix it. And so if you want to be a good clinician, you have to recognize that you're coming at everything with some sort of framework, and you have to do your best to set that aside during the data gathering phase. And then once you feel like you've got enough data and the patterns are starting to emerge, then you can allow your framework to come back in. But it's a challenging thing to set that aside.
And how long did it take you to get to that point where it was second nature for you?
I'm still working on it.
Still okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah, our brains are obviously very fascinating places, and all the stuff that goes on that we're really not even aware of it's troubling, but it's also pretty interesting.
Yeah, you're right, because you can get really like deep in yourself if you start thinking about, number one, we only use what do they say, like 10% of our brain power or some area. I could be wrong.
They say that. I don't know how to, because I think a better way to think about that, or a more accurate way to think about that, is maybe we're only using a portion of our brain at any given time, sort of like we're only using a portion of our physical muscles at any given time. We wouldn't use all of our muscles at once. So we don't really use all of our brain at once necessarily.
Now, we do have somebody on the line here that wishes to ask you or just make a comment. This is 631. You're live. Do you have a question for the doctor?
How's it going, Cris?
Hey, how are you tonight?
How's it going, Dr. Shawn? All right. You guys doing good, having a good show tonight.
All right.
Just wanted to actually ask Dr. Shawn a question.
Shoot.
So, I'm currently dealing with a 3-year-old and an infant. But I wanted to find out what some of the big pitfalls you have seen with children. I noticed the comment about caffeine too young. Even in this age, wondering what some of the traps to avoid, if you had any offhand.
I think screen time is a big one. You want to keep them engaged in the real world as long as possible. And there was a study that came out here real recently that said that, your kids are really young, but for teenagers and so forth, that the screen time isn't necessarily detrimental as long as it's a reasonable amount, but it's the social media that's really detrimental to kids, developing teenagers and so forth. But, you got little kids that you're in a great position, and being a dad is, it's super easy. You got to do 2 things. You got to provide warmth and structure. You got to have both of them. You can't have one without the other, but if you provide warmth and structure, they'll be fine.
What cases do you see the most?
Well, I'm known for doing certain things. So I these days I see a lot of men, and they're dealing with a lot of relationship issues. And I suppose what would normally walk into your average psychologist's office would be the average things that people are dealing with, which would be depression and anxiety. And I don't work with depression because I'm not particularly good at it. And so I refer out for that. But yeah, these days it's mostly guys and couples and a little bit of anxiety.
Well, I think anxiety is like a major general thing that a lot of people deal with.
Yeah, anxiety and substances.
Or otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's everywhere. And, the other thing that is everywhere is alcohol and pot and some degree of substance abuse.
Well, geez, I mean, it's legal over by you now. So
yeah,
I thought that was a great thing.
Yeah, I wish it was legal everywhere. I live in Denver, and we're on the forefront of that. And so our population boomed, and our city grew a little too fast because we legalized and other people didn't. So if everyone else would legalize, then we could spread the joy a little bit. And
it sounds like Shawn not only is, what is it, like they do the hair club thing, not only a client, but does it. So we'll don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I don't use it myself. I don't have anything against it. It's never really appealed to me. And I tell you, since it's got legalized, I do see it creeping into people's lives a lot more than I used to. And what I mean by that is people who suddenly wake up one day and they realize that they're using a lot more than they thought they were using, and it's becoming a bit of a problem for them.
Yeah, and I agree. I think what we're seeing here, and I know many people in law enforcement, they say basically that because not that people weren't doing it before, and they were, and they were making busts on people that were driving around doing it, but now it's to the point where it's so rampant that they're not even really writing tickets. Well, they'll write tickets for it, but they're not arresting anybody anymore for it. So I don't know how I feel about that. Franklin, what do you feel about people being able to, smoke marijuana, and whether it's for health purposes or even recreationally?
I was waiting for that, and sadly, you know what? I sort of lean. How do I say this? I mean, like you said before, everybody's doing it, but it's just not for me. Like Shawn said, it's not his cup of tea. It's certainly not mine. If it, how do I say this? If this could be controlled somehow, like I mean, I just don't like the idea of somebody higher than the cost of living driving, like you said, driving around in a car or something like that, and not being totally aware of what's around them, and not being able to, everybody knows that it slows down your, I guess it's your motor functions. Correct me if I'm wrong. It slows down your functions and your awareness and all like that. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it. I mean, I know it's designed to keep the jails not as full, keep the jail space for people who really need to be there, type of a thing. But, gee, Cris, I'm not sure if I'm for it or if I'm not sure if I'm against it.
What part of the country are you in, Franklin?
I'm in the Northeast. I'm in New York.
Okay, so it's not legal there.
No,
I don't think it is. Is it, Cris?
It's actually not. It's legal if you have a medical permit for it.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. Okay.
So that's the thing, and then people, when they get stopped, they'll be like, "Oh, well, I do have a med card, but I don't have it with me. It's in my house." So that's how they get around it.
We went through that phase here in Denver, where before it was legal recreationally, it was legal if you had a doctor's note. And my office is in a little medical building, and so we have all these little medical offices and doctors and so forth. And when it was legal with a doctor's note, we had a clinic set up or a dispensary set up in our building. It stunk up the whole building. It was terrible. But what I would see is these 25-year-old guys who would bound up the stairs, and then they would start limping down the hall to pick up their prescription. And I was saying, hey, let's just legalize this stuff. Let's do away with the farce here. And,
that's the word I was looking for, dispensary.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like with Franklin on this. I understand it in terms of medical purposes. What I don't like is that, and I see it more on the local news, where you're getting these reports of somebody went the wrong way, or they smashed into some family, and it's not alcohol. They say, well, he was driving under the influence of drugs, and yes, it could have been anything else, but we haven't seen any of those reports until the past couple of years when it got passed for medical use. So I think to your point, Shawn, I think we have a lot of that here too, where people are running into the front of the building and then, limping up to the door, and then, jogging out the back door. So,
question now, how does that work out then? If it's legal in your jurisdiction, okay, you get into an accident and you're clearly under the influence of something that's legal. I'm sorry. How does that work? Sorry. How does that work out? I have to cough. Give me 1 second.
Well, wait, are you asking Shawn about his opinion? Because he doesn't.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, Shawn. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a legal guy, and I'm very libertarian. I tend not to care what anybody does as long as they're not hurting somebody else. But you're asking about people who are hurting somebody else because they're getting stoned and driving, presumably, right? And that's not cool. I don't know. I'm not a legal guy. I would think that would fall under the heading of driving under the influence or driving while intoxicated.
Yeah, that would make sense. Okay.
Now, okay. So moving on from that, because we're not going to have Shawn or anybody debate policy here.
Yeah.
So we're not going to get anywhere.
It's above my pay grade.
Shawn, could you just give me a few general things that maybe people out there, guys and girls, having issues in their relationships, and maybe they're coming from two different ends. What are some of the things in general? And we don't have $500 to give you to give a whole dissertation and help session on this, but what are some of maybe 4 things that people that are having trouble in a relationship could think about to help that out? Help themselves.
I'm very big on, I'll answer your question, but I'll say first, I'm very big on avoiding the relationships where you're going to have problems. I'm big on choosing people of character and people who know how to conduct themselves and have arguments constructively and work things out and have shared values with you, so that, because if you're on the same page with the big 4 things, which is sex, money, children, and religion, and I guess you could throw in-laws and family in there too. If you've got those things in order and you're not stupidly young and you're making intentional relationship decisions, you lower your chances of divorce tremendously. Everybody says that there's a 50% chance you're going to get divorced. Well, no, there's a 100% chance or there's a 0% chance, and you can get it a lot closer to 0 if you just manage some of the big variables. But to answer your question, I think I would just give one thing, which is stop buying your own bullshit about what's going on. If you're having a problem with somebody, you're probably telling yourself a story about how they've wronged you and you're doing all the right stuff and they're doing all the wrong stuff. And that's the road to hell. So start looking at things from the other point of view and you'll probably make a lot more progress.
Right. And also people can take those notes themselves if they follow the link right here on the display to Amazon, to your book, The Tactical Guide to Women. It's available at Amazon directly on that link right there, ladies and gentlemen. And it's also in an Audible version through Audible, the actual audiobook portion of Amazon.
So, is it?
Yes.
You know me and Audible. That's my jam.
I got a good narrator.
One more book there.
I stumble over words when I read, but I got a really good guy named Cris, and he's got golden dulcet tones. He's very easy to listen to.
Well, I'm going to write that down at the end of the show. That's where I'm going.
Now, again, we spoke earlier about you being, vocal towards the AP? What's
American Psychological Association, the APA.
Yes. Yeah. If you could see a change in policy, or have maybe how the data is looked at changed, what are some of those things?
I would pull out all of the ideology and not just the ones that I don't like feminism. I think the feminism that they inject into everything they put out, and that's overstated. Not everything they put out. So they do put out some useful stuff, but it's all tainted. It's even if they put out something good and useful, it's hard to take it seriously because so much of what they do is driven by this angry ideology that they have. And so that would be the first thing I do, is just let's get rid of the politics and the ideology. Let's stick to the data. And I've always been really particular about data and research methods from my first research methods course. I don't particularly like the way a lot of social science does its research. And I understand there's a reason for it and I wouldn't eliminate it. But what a lot of it is they'll take a small sample size, like they'll take an N of 30 and they'll try to collect as controlled amount of data as they can from that group and then extrapolate out as much as they possibly can to a larger theoretical framework. And to my mind, that's always been backwards. You should, if you're really interested in identifying patterns, you collect as much data as possible and then you see where the patterns emerge. And you see some of that in the social sciences. Like you see the big 5 personality traits that have become very popular, because Jordan Peterson talks about them a lot. I think that's contributed a lot to their popularity. But the big 5 personality traits are really solid and dependable. And the reason they're so solid and dependable is because there's just a mountain of data that has accumulated around these concepts. And the big 5 happen to be the patterns that have emerged in the data. And I think that's the right way to collect data. So I would say 2 things. Let's look at how we're, getting a little too fine with the statistics and trying to pull too much out of too little. And for the love of God, let's get rid of the ideology. You still there, Franklin?
Yeah, I think he is.
Okay.
I'm still here, Chris.
For a minute. Okay.
Yeah, Chris, you disappeared for a minute.
Yeah, I know I hit something. Production difficulties. I guess my final question to you tonight, Shawn, is that we know you have the book out there, The Tactical Guide to Women. Are you working on anything new for the new year? Any new plans, things like that?
Yeah, I have a book that's sort of formulating in my mind. The way the book seemed to come about with me is I think about it for a really long time, and then I finally get an image of what the book is going to look like, and I'm approaching that point where I have an image of what it's going to look like, and I'll probably start working on it on one of these days, and it'll be a follow-up to the Tactical Guide to Women, and it'll probably be along the lines of helping men have permission to have standards with their relationships, because this seems to be something that is discouraged. Men should not have standards for women. Women should have standards for men, but men should not have standards for women. And, obviously men should. And
that's right. Well, just don't throw any top 10 lists online, because that seems to be a triggering point for a lot of people up there on Twitter. So
yes,
that's not allowed.
Yeah, no, you're not allowed to have standards for women.
All right,
Judge me.
Yeah. Now, Franklin, do you have anything that you'd like to ask Shawn?
Yeah, I do have a question. Did you buy your wife a Peloton for Christmas?
That ad, people got so worked up about that ad. You know what's funny about my wife is she's a wonderful person, and she told me she would have loved to have a Peloton. It would have been great.
Ooh, that wouldn't have gone over well.
No, she actually would have liked it. She'd probably be on it right now if I got her one. Yeah.
How dare you like a $3,000 bicycle that doesn't go anywhere?
Yeah, well, I bought her a $3,000 bicycle that does go somewhere, and she likes that a lot. So,
Actually.
Well, you like to be in the outdoors, right, Shawn?
Yeah, my wife and I are pretty athletic. Our daughter would sit in the corner and read a book all day if we let her, so we have to drag her outside.
Nah.
Yeah.
Read a book. Wow, you got one of the lucky ones. No video games for her?
No, she has no. She'll do YouTube and so forth. We have to kind of keep an eye on that. But no,
right.
she walks around with books. Ever since she was a little kid, books are like her security blanket, like they were to Linus. Linus is the one that carried around the blanket, right?
That's him.
And she carries around books. And to this day, she still carries around books as her security blanket.
Oh, wow. Good for you. Good for you. That's good
parenting.
That's what that is.
Well, thank you.
That's good parenting. Don't be shy. That's just good parenting.
Well, I appreciate it.
Good for you.
And I think as one of our watchers and listeners here is saying, Shawn, you're really one of the best guests we've had on. Now this is the second time around. I want to thank you again for taking time out. I know you're uber busy, and you could do 1,000 other things, with your evenings and come on here, but I appreciate that.
Yes, we both do. Thank you for showing up.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. All right. And we'll talk to you soon, Shawn. Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Have a wonderful night.